All right, so today we're talking about Woodrow Wilson and the 14 points. Woodrow Wilson, he was president during World War I, right before the U.S. entered the war, and then during it. And the 14 points were basically Wilson's idea of how they can end the war and everything that they needed to do to remain at peace with each other, and all of his ideas that he wanted to implement towards Germany and the rest of the countries and U.S. relations between the countries. So World War I, it lasted from 1914 to 1918, and around 1917 is when the U.S. entered the war, and after that is when the Allies started actually winning. So in 1918, they were looking to end the war with Germany and with the Central Powers. And so Wilson proposed January 8th, 1918, the 14 points to Congress. And he saw them as being, the right way to handle things. And they were very generous and farsighted as to how it kind of handled things with Germany. And a lot of the other countries weren't really for them at first. England and France definitely think that it didn't satisfy the wartime vindication that they deserved, especially with everything that they had been through in the past 4 years. And they did not want to agree to the 14 points at all until Wilson threatened to create a separate treaty that did not even involve France and England in it. And then after that, the rest of the countries kind of got on board with everything. It kind of went downhill because there was an election in 1918 in Congress and in the Senate, and Wilson kind of basically wanted everyone to vote and make sure that there was a Democratic House and a Democratic Senate, and he really pushed for the people to vote and still have the Democrats be in power, because he thought it would look a lot better and that it would kind of make the United States feel like a united front, and that the entire U.S. agreed with him by voting for all of the Democrats to be in the House. And because of that, he actually lost both the House and the Senate to Republicans. So he didn't really have that control over ratifying any of this anymore. And originally, the peace conference lasted from January to May of 1918. And at the end of it, they finally agreed on certain terms with the 14 points. Not all of them were accepted. Only about 3 of them were actually fully fulfilled, and only a couple more of them were compromised on. Because of this, one of the 14 points that actually came to is it created 2 independent nations, which was Poland and Czechoslovakia. Which is one of the good things that I guess came out of it. It also made Germany accept the responsibility for the war and pay reparations of $33 billion, which in the long run would eventually kind of lead Germany to, be a little pissed off about everything and how everything was handled, which would eventually lead to World War II with Germany. And one of Wilson's main things that he wanted in the 14 points was a League of Nations, and that was probably his main point that he really wanted to get across. And after the peace conference, England and Germany and France and all these countries, they agreed to a League of Nations, but then when Wilson brought it back, the country was not really around a League of Nations. They kind of thought that they don't need other countries in their own personal business, and so they don't want countries to really kind of stick their nose in the U.S. And so the people supported it, but Congress, mainly Republican, did not support it at all. They thought it was putting the U.S. in way too many international relations with other countries, and especially with everything turning mainly Republican. He didn't really have like a strong foothold and a way to convince Congress to vote any other way. And then eventually Wilson actually had a stroke. And so when he was trying to go around and get support for everything, he couldn't because he could not even attend his own cabinet meetings. Um, and so he couldn't really have the House or anything vote in his favor. The first time they sent it through to get a League of Nations, it did not pass with, they wanted it to pass with certain amendments to it, and Wilson did not want that. So he had the Democrats vote against it, and so it failed. And then the second time, they did it again, and it still failed, but only by like 7 votes. So it wasn't really that far in between. So he didn't really, his main point, he didn't really get the League of Nations. Eventually it did get created, but not really with Wilson's help and Wilson's support. And then he unfortunately passed away a few years after everything. All in all, it took, because of the United States, it took an additional 3 years to get out of the war. So technically, the U.S. was still at war with all of these countries until 1921, even though all the fighting ended in 1918. So overall, the 14 points, while some of them were great, it wasn't really that effective, and it didn't really have a lot of success, especially with the main points that they wanted to get across. So yeah, thank you for listening.